Well, the bank itself got off the ground just about 2 years back. But formally, after we got our headquarters agreement in China going and actually getting the bank up, it's just about a year and a couple of months. Thereafter, we have been in discussions with the government here on the headquarters agreement. So it's basically a matter of procedural process, I would say.
Right. So as the regional center gets launched this week, you have South Africa, but not only South Africa, other African countries with itchy feet wanting to knock on the door asking for funding. But as I understand it, the bank is only investing in their members at the moment. When and how will that change?
Well, as to put things in context, the Articles of Association of the bank permit all countries who are members of the UN to become members. The Board of Governors of the bank have to take the decision on the timing. So at our annual meeting in April this year, the decision has been taken to widen the membership. But the process for that will have to be determined by the governors. And that we expect to happen in the next few months.
The next issue comes up with the denomination of the lending and rising of funds, Mr. President. I mean, let's take our country, for example, our state utility department, Eskom, receiving a $180 million loan from the NDB. It's in dollar-denominated currency, and some have raised concerns that it could be quite tight for the taxpayer in case of a bailout, for example. How do we justify that?
You raised a very important question. In fact, the subject of currency and the use of local currency was something that was top of my mind when we actually started up the bank. And one of the first things I did discussing with the Chinese authorities was whether they would be open to a bond issue in renminbi, which they understood the issue very quickly, exactly as you put it, and gave us approval for a 10 billion renminbi issue, roughly $1.5 billion US dollars. So clearly countries started thinking about local currency. From 2 years back to date, every single leader of the BRICS countries and the finance ministers talk of local currency, exactly in the context you did. So our plan now is renminbi for sure. India, there's a masala bond market, and we will access the offshore masala bond market in the next, in the latter part of this year. My earlier trip to South Africa, I sounded pension funds here in particular. I wasn't sure that there would be appetite, but there was for paper issued by an NDB. So I asked them, why will there be an appetite? They said, basically, we want to diversify risk. So long story short, China, India, South Africa, and a month back I was in Russia. Again, the same feeling that come and access our markets. I think this whole momentum toward de-risking our countries from externalities, I think is gathering a great, pace. And we will certainly be looking at how we could lend in local currencies, a significant part of our lending program. Because honestly, as you say, there is no point in leaving residual risk on the currency to people who will follow us in the future.
Let me use the Eskom example for another point I'd like your reaction to. You have a $180 million loan given to Eskom. I mean, here's a state utility that for all intents and purposes are experiencing major inefficiencies and are at the mercy of government guarantees. So the cynics would say, well, why are you lending to a state utility that is in such a doldrums? Is this just not a representation of now South Africa being pushed in a corner within the BRICS powerful groupings that they sit among?
No, that's not correct at all. The way we have approached the lending, each country has a different way in which projects are presented to multilateral lenders or whichever fora that they would seek assistance from. In the case of certain countries, it is well set up within a particular ministry, which has a pipeline of projects based on developmental need, the ability of the provinces to implement projects and borrow projects and so on. So there's a well laid out structure. And we follow that process in terms of onboarding a project. Of course, then we submit the project to our own appraisal and then look at it. So as I said, each country, it is different. In South Africa, there is a coordinating committee, the Ministry of Ministers, which I think is a good process.
Yeah.
Process. And that, I would say, structure, we expect, will come up with a larger slate of projects in the coming years. And my job this time round, and the job of this office, is going to talk to all parties. The parties could start at the municipal level, could start at the provincial level, could be at the central level, could be entities set up by the state, which is state-owned enterprises, any of these. Now, we have two types of lending from the NDB. We have sovereign guaranteed loans and we have private sector loans or non-sovereign guaranteed loans. So we have a window for both. At this point in time, we are really prepared with the sovereign guaranteed loan portfolio. Looking at our vintage, we are young, we are yet to set up the risk practices for doing private sector loans. But that will follow. So this is going to be the mix for all countries. And exactly what we will follow for South Africa and for other countries as we go along.
The biggest difference for you between the NDB and your traditional lenders like the World Bank and IMF, from an emerging country point of view, what would that be?
Well, let's put it this way. Firstly, I think the NDB, to me, symbolizes the South saying that we can try and stand on our own feet. Yeah. I think that, to me, is an important signal that is being sent out. Secondly, I think once you send out the signal, we need to see, is there next practice that we can build on? Taking the learnings from these existing institutions which have done enormous good. We believe one of the next practices is to see whether we can do things at speed. So we are setting ourselves a time frame of 3 to 6 months to do a project. And so far we have been able to do that as against much longer time frames that have been taken. One. And the second area is going to be innovation in terms of, we talked about currency, for example, type of instruments, and I would say the sheer target investments that we want to do. And they need not be just loans. Can we do it in other instruments? Can we do a guarantee? Can we do a partial guarantee? I think these will all follow from our, say, second year onwards, which is this year. Clearly, there is a whole lot to be done, a whole lot to be learned from the commercial lending sphere, and then applied to the business that we do.
Okay, so with regards to being an alternative to those Western lenders, you signed as the bank a memorandum of understanding with the World Bank not so long ago. And there are some that says, hang on, that appears to be a fusion and does very little for the notion that you are an alternative to Western lenders. How would you react to a
very
remark
interesting
like that?
question. In fact, we have partnerships with several entities. They include multilateral development banks. They include banks, commercial banks, and a variety of institutions. Now, why the World Bank or the ADB or this is a very simple reason. There is a whole wealth of experience which has been accumulated over the period. And they are very happy to share, and we are very keen to understand how they've gone about business. So those learnings are being onboarded. And as I said, building on that, we go to next practice. So I think they are doing a whole lot of good in their own way for all these years. And the quickest path for us is to pick those learnings and develop on that. So that's what's happening in that field. And I must say that they've been also very open in sharing thought and knowledge.
But the philosophy behind the bank remains intact in terms of its targets.
Clear. It's very clear.
All right. One more notion that I actually would like to get your view on is this notion of Asian bias. When you look at some of the proposals to extend or enlarge BRICS, you see that many of the names of countries that pitch up there are from Asia. And again, the cynics would say, as BRICS and consequently the BRICS, the development bank, it doesn't carry this Asian bias with it and ignore the emerging countries in Africa. What would you say to that?
No, not as the BRICS, because just now it is just 5 of us working together in a governance structure. Each has a 20% vote, and we clearly believe in looking at it that way at this point in time. Even when we will have more members in, the articles clearly provide how the 5 of us will handle our shareholding. We can come down in whatever proportion, but equally to not less than 55%. So from 20% we can each go proportionately to 11%. So clearly the founding voice is going to be is there. I think as far as other members that will come in due course, as I said, that's the call that the governors will take. There again, if you look at it, there are limitations put on who can come with what number. So for the non-borrowing countries, the limit is 20%. And for other borrowing countries, it is 25%. So 55, 25, and 20 is the way it will be. So I do not think there will be a governance issue or a biased representation going into the future.
If I walk into a bank and I want to buy a house, I'm interested in the interest rate. It's not going to be any different with the African or emerging countries approaching you. No. What can you say in that regard?
It will be the same rate. As far as the sovereign loan is concerned, the rate is the same.
In accordance to the sovereign loan?
It is the same for each sovereign.
Yeah.
So we will not differentiate on the lending rate to a loan which is guaranteed by the sovereign, whichever country it is.
Interesting. Our former Reserve Bank Governor, Tito Mboweni, was very unhappy that he's leaving the bank this week. And I suppose from your experience, Mr. Kamath, it's big shoes to fill, Mr. Tito Mboweni, is it not?
Mr. Tito Mboweni actually contributed a lot to the founding of the bank. I think every founding director did, because it was a clean slate. He brought a whole lot of his experience in central banking to the bank, and we were privileged to have him as chair of our audit committee. So indeed, his was a very strong push and support in the initial setting up of the bank.
All right, I just want to end up by asking you, if there's one thing that you want to see secure this week as the regional center kicks off, what would that be?
I would think that we need to be relevant. We need to be relevant in all our member countries, but particularly so in Africa, because I see a whole lot of potential. I see potential looking at learnings in other countries which can be taken into not only South Africa but across the continent. And I hope we are able to make that pitch and succeed in that. And I hope this office gives us that window to look at opportunity, to learn, to understand and to deliver.